Hi guys, how are you doing today? This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I'm kind of back into the thick of things, creating content again, just creating a list of different things that I like to do. I'm going to get back into the swing of creating a routine and continuity of videos so that I can be more consistent and talking about issues that affect our community, American culture, and abroad. So today, and I know I may be a little bit late on the issue, but I don't feel so late about it because it's a constant evolving issue as it involves the crisis that occurred in Uvalde, Texas. We're talking about Robb Elementary. And so I want to kind of discuss, at the time that it occurred, I was basically just recovering from COVID, which kind of put me out of doing content for over a week and a half. This is something that I have experienced because this is the same thing, a very similar thing happened in Santa Fe, Texas. Actually, I had a practice in Santa Fe, Texas. A few years ago, that was a shooting of 8 or 9 people that died. I actually counseled a family and a kid that knew him from Texas City High School, even because Santa Fe and Texas City, where I'm actually located, are within 10 minutes from each other. And so he attended, the gunman for the Santa Fe disaster went to school at Texas City and transferred to Santa Fe. So I have been involved in these type of issues before. I've also been requested for the gunman that killed the policemen in Texas, in Dallas. And there was another issue, some other issues that happened in Dallas in which I've been consulted. And unfortunately, I choose not to get involved in particularly cases that involves a lot of media. Just in this particular case, immediately when this occurred, before 9 o'clock that night, an employment assistance program in Uvalde, Texas, asked for me to provide online virtual counseling for those that needed it in that community. I did tell them that I was interested, and at this moment we are going through some paperwork in regards to how I would facilitate that. The red tape that they're giving me right now, I don't know if I am going to go through with it. I'm probably not. And that's one reason why I choose not to go into high profile cases. And I'm usually consulted in some capacity, particularly if it's in the state of Texas. But what I want to highlight is the fact that as I'm watching this locally, living in Houston, there's a lot of criticism given to the police of Uvalde, stating that they responded in a very slow manner, or a manner that was, to me, less than appreciated by the community. Also, the fact of the gunman, Salvador Ramos, killed his grandmother that day. And through all of this, and I know there's a lot of those who are the conservative persuasion, talk about gun rights. I have no issues with gun rights, but something is wrong that when an 18-year-old kid can just walk into a gun store and buy automatic weapons. Something to me just doesn't sound right about that. Now, I've always been a proponent that people who buy guns should go through psychological testing, particularly if they've had behavioral issues or psychological issues although in this case of Mr. Ramos, there was no history, quote unquote, history of him having mental illness or a criminal record. Therefore, the police did not see a clear motive to why he did the act. However, as we all know, we found out that he was bullied. He was not treated well, and he sought revenge. And he waited until he was 18 so that he can carry out this evil act. And so what that tells me is that Mr. Ramos, Mr. Salvador Ramos, fantasized, he planned, and he was psychologically affected by the fact that he was treated a certain way that he was not comfortable with, and he was unable to cope with it long term, which propelled him to wreak havoc on that community. Now, psychologists, according to Newsweek, as I was looking at a Newsweek article, a psychologist stated that he dropped out of school or he was expelled, basically, for misbehavior. And in the point of him being expelled, it caused him to be disaffectionate, or he was isolated. And in his isolation, it probably intensified his tendency to want to cause violence onto others, particularly little children. Now, no matter what way they spin it, because there were several psychologists that spoke on the incident itself and what could have caused this or triggered this man, this young man, to do what he did. But there's just not enough data as we speak because of a lack of paper trail involved in his mental mental capacity, mental status, or his behavior in school to in some way give predictors or warning signs. But as I look at the story, it sounds like this person was highly disturbed, and he was not happy with his life. I do understand that he moved out of his mother's home to live with his grandmother, whom he killed, and he was troubled. And a lot of times, I'm not going to say whether he had a mental illness or not is not an excuse for what he did. However, mental illness is very easily misunderstood and can go under the radar. And that's what I like to preface in this particular situation. It's obvious this person has problems. Now, was that an excuse to buy 2 guns and to kill people? No, it's not. Now, I go into the schools. There's several schools that I go into to provide therapy, particularly kids that are in foster care and kids that need behavioral intervention at home and in the school setting. Many of the schools I go into, you can't just go walking into those schools. And yes, I understood he came through the back and so forth. But most of the schools have changed their protocol from a security standpoint, in which you have to identify yourself, press a button and identify yourself, and they're looking at you before you can come in. Particularly since the crisis that occurred, a tragedy in Santa Fe, Texas, I have noticed that most schools in most school districts, independent school districts, have changed their protocol to enter into schools. Very few schools that I know of, you can just walk in and they let you, they let you in easily. Very few schools that I know that you can just walk in and they just allow you to do whatever you want. It just doesn't happen that way, at least from the several school districts that I have seen to provide therapy for children. adolescents, and teenagers. So what can we learn from this? It sounds like to me America ain't learned a damn thing, because there's still people in the midst of a tragedy. They're using this as an opportunity to talk about amendment rights, to bear arms. This is not about your inability to bear arms. It's about the policing and governmental policy that restrict people like him and others who are not mature enough and who are not mentally stable enough to be carrying firearms, particularly if they're attempting to cause harm to others. And for some reason, and I don't want to get political, but I'm not going to make this into a conservative, liberal issue. This is an American issue. An American issue, the fact that we do have the freedom to bear arms. But why should that freedom be used? And we cannot overlook those who are using that freedom for harm to others, innocent children. Also in the Newsweek article, it talked about the fact that the issues that go on with children with behavioral issues, children who drop out of school, zero tolerance, would lead kids to hate the past of having a bad experience in the school system, in the American school educational system. That they want to get revenge. Most of the shooters at these schools were kids who didn't go to those schools, or they were older, or they're there, but they wanted revenge on people. Now, I'm proposing, and of course, I don't want teachers carrying guns, but what I'm going to say is that for every school district in America, there needs to be even more protocol for security in all perimeters of the school itself, whether it's someone making their rounds, a security guard or two making their rounds, and so on. And definitely there should be situations where maybe there need to be codes that need to be entered to open all doors, because this kid knew of the certain doors to go in, but there needs to be more protocol to restrict people from easily entering into schools. Now, I've seen improvements, particularly in multiple school districts throughout the Houston, Galveston County area, Fort Bend area. I don't know if other schools throughout the country or the state are taking extra precautions, but I've seen improvements, and I think the improvements are pretty good. Again, I'm talking from a basis, the fact that professionally, I have counseled and provided therapy for victims who have endured this tragic event of almost dying, developing potentially issues of anxiety, post-traumatic stress, depression. Those are the likely issues, the trauma, dealing with the trauma of almost dying and seeing others dying. Knowing that your friend died, that you grew up with senselessly. These are the issues, these are the things that are talked about. Parents trying to make sense of this, to explain to their children. There have also been instances of children in the state of Texas saying they don't feel safe going to school. There were several instances, particularly in the Uvalde area and throughout other cities, major cities in Texas, where the kids were saying, I don't want to go back to school for the remainder of the year, even though there are only a few days of school left. So these are the issues, the topics that are going to have to be dealt with entering into fall of 2020. Now, I want to say this. I definitely am disappointed at the police. And I'm going to guess in that county and in that city, there will be changes come election time because of this issue. You cannot be lethargic in the response of saving the lives of anyone, particularly children. So I want to thank you all for being here today. Please leave comments in the comment section. As I've spoken of this, not only from a mental health standpoint, professional standpoint, from a political standpoint, just from an observation as a father, and the fact of seeing these things. I hate when I get referrals or opportunities where people want you to deal with crisis intervention of this level. I personally don't like providing therapy under those crisis-related tragic circumstances. I dislike it a great deal because you're putting yourself in a heightened situation, short term, where you can burn yourself out. Yes, you can. And the fact that there's so much media coverage and political issues around it that people lose sight of the issue, and that's to keep children safe. So this is D. Darrell with D. Darrell Life Solutions. I hope you have a great day. Please leave comments in the comment section. Please subscribe and share.